Board for Thursday, December 17th. We have three matters on the docket for tonight. Two are continuances. One is a new matter. Before we get to the matters at hand, if everyone would please rise. Thank you. The first matter for tonight is Appeal 2958. Again, it was continued from since the November meeting. The applicant, Pexon, property located at 118 West Beech Tree Lane and zoned R4, seeks a variance from Code Section 280:30.c to encroach into the front yard setback area. Assume the applicant is here.
He's recovering in a rehab center right now, so I'm his son.
Oh, boy. Okay, before we proceed, we have to make sure that he has power of attorney to represent the applicant. I know you're the son.
Right.
But are you the owner of the property?
I'm not the owner of the property.
So you're not on the deed at all?
I'm not.
Do you happen to have a letter or something that's from your father telling you that you have the power to represent him in this matter?
I don't have the letter, but I can give him a call.
No.
I was here last time with him.
Yeah, I do remember that, but we do need the applicant to put on his case. Correct, John? Put your mic on.
Our application guidelines call for a power of attorney when the people with the actual interest in the property are not present. And there's reasons for that. It's not, we have to be able to bind your father with the same effect as if he was actually here. And, that power of attorney is a document that does that, and we have that in the record. You can speak for your father and bind your father and so forth.
So if I get a letter really quickly, but it has...
It should be a power of attorney. It should be we provide for a power of attorney. I mean, power of attorney is an acknowledged document and not just simply a letter.
Okay. So even Mike as a contractor can't speak on the variance alone?
No, you don't have to you wouldn't have to re-advertise. We just need to continue to a date where either your father is here, or if your father is not here, is not going to be here, he can give you a power of attorney, and we have one on our website, and that you can use for it and get it notarized. But we do need a power of attorney.
Okay.
So he can't even request a continuance.
It'll be continued tonight.
No, we can request a continuance. We can continue it ourselves.
Okay, so we're going to continue this to the January meeting.
To the January.
Yes.
Okay.
Just remember, either he comes or get a power of attorney. Yep. Okay.
So can I get your name for the record, please?
Sure.
Again, anyone that's on the deed can be here. Okay, that was simple. All right, so the next matter is Appeal 2960. The applicants Brian Daggett and friends Rob Bauer, property located on Julep Run, also known as 15 South Valley Forge Road. I have 2960. You have a different one. Oh, this is last. This is last, Mary. Okay, sorry. I'll start again. The applicants Brian Daggett and friends Rob Bauer, property located on Julep Run, also known as 15 South Valley Forge Road, folio number 360-301-64512, and zoned ACDM. Seek relief from Section 280-112D of the zoning code and any other relief deemed necessary to construct a three-car garage. Alternatively, the applicant seeks a determination that Section 28112 does not apply to man-made steep slopes. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm George Brosman, representing the applicants. With me this evening is David Fiorello, our civil engineer, John Totes, the architect, and one of the owners of the property, Mr. Franz Rabauer. And I'm going to call Mr. Fiorello as our witness, and the others would be available as needed. I have an exhibit package I would like to hand out, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
I would like to just get right into it and call David Fiorello to be sworn.
For just a second, does this exhibit packet replace the exhibit packet that we were previously given?
Do you mean my application?
Yes. In other words, we received a packet with your application and plan. Does this replace?
It's probably duplicative. A1 is a full copy of the application, and then A2 is Mr. Fiorello's CV. A3 is just a bigger colored copy of the site plan that was part of the application, or the existing conditions plan. A4 is the proposed plan, a larger color copy, but the same plan that was in the application. And then A5 and A6 are some photographs that were not probably in the application. These are
Okay.
new photographs.
Okay, fair enough. But nothing in the original application has been superseded. It's just the same stuff in
Correct.
different format.
Correct. Could I have Mr. Fiorello sworn in?
Yes.
Sir, if you would raise your right hand, you do solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth.
I do.
And state your name, please.
David Fiorello.
David, can you briefly describe your educational and professional experience?
I'm a graduate from Villanova University in the School of Engineering, 1972. I'm a registered professional civil engineer, and I've been practicing civil engineering since 1972.
At Exhibit A2, is that a written summary of your professional qualifications?
Yes, it is.
I'd like to offer Mr. Fiorello as an expert in civil engineering.
Accept.
David, are you the civil engineer for the applicants in connection with this proposed garage?
Yes, I am.
And are you familiar with the property that's the subject of this application?
Yes, I am.
Turning your attention to Exhibit A3, and we've placed a larger copy of A3 up here on the screen. Is this an existing conditions plan of the property?
Yes, it is.
Referring to this exhibit, can you describe the existing conditions on the property?
The property has frontage on the cul-de-sac of Julep Run. However, it does not have access off of Julep Run. It has access through a driveway easement through the adjacent property on the South Valley Forge Road. There is an existing dwelling, a converted stone barn, a swimming pool pretty much in the center of the property. The driveway comes in, wise off at the point, serves the dwelling to the south, and goes to the north of the buildings to serve the stone barn.
And is the barn somewhat historic?
The barn has been there for quite a while. It was part of the original property before the property was subdivided.
Now, we'll get into this, but does this plan show areas of regulated steep slopes?
We have shown the areas of slopes between the range of 14 to 20%. They're shown on this plan in a light blue hatching, and the regulated slopes, 20% and greater, are shown on this plan in the pinkish color.
And it's the 20% or greater that are regulated by the zoning ordinance?
Yes.
Now, can we switch to Exhibit A4, which is the proposed plan? Can you describe what is proposed in this application?
First of all, this plan is a blow-up of the previous plan that shows the area at a larger scale around the barn. The applicant is proposing to construct a three-car garage, sort of in a bank barn fashion, off the edge of the existing driveway across from the barn into the area of slopes.
And but for the steep slope relief that we're seeking here this evening, has the garage been designed to comply with the applicable dimensional criteria of the zoning ordinance, such as setbacks and things like that?
Yes, it has.
Moving on to the issue of steep slopes, do your plans identify the area of steep slopes that would be disturbed by the proposed garage construction?
Yes, we have an area outlined in yellow and a dashed line, which indicates the area of disturbance that would be associated with construction of the barn. And within that area of disturbance, there's 1,515 square feet of steep slope that would be disturbed.
Now, on the plan A4, you note the 1515, but there's a typo about the...
There is a typo in the acreage. The acreage is 0.03 acres.
So 0.3% of an acre,
Yes.
correct?
Okay, excuse me, the typo is in
The acreage on the plan is noted as 0.34 acres. When you do the math, it's nowhere near that.
It should be 0.0348 in the parenthetical next to the 1515. I'm pointing to it here with my finger.
Yes. So it should be what again?
I believe it should be 0.03 acres. It's 1,500 square feet.
0.
So the area to be disturbed of 1515 is accurate. It was just the conversion into acreage that we wanted to point out was overstated. Is that right, David?
Yes.
Now, have you gone out to the property and seen these area of slopes?
Yes, I have.
Based on your examination of the area and your experience, do you have an opinion of whether they're man-made or naturally occurring?
I believe from the grading that was done around the buildings and the construction that was done in the area for the driveway, that those areas adjacent to the driveway in the area where we're showing the steep slopes are man-made.
Now, skipping ahead, skipping A5 for a moment and moving to A6. These are A6A, B, and C, 3 photographs. Can you briefly describe these photos, and as you do, explain if and how they support your opinion that the slopes are man-made?
This photograph A is taken from a point down the driveway looking up to the east with the barn in the background. You can see behind the shrubbery the wall of the wing wall of the ramp to the barn. The area to the left, beneath the trees covered by leaves, is the area in along the left side, the north side of the driveway. That area is roughly graded at a 3-to-1 slope, which is indicative of a slope that would be cut in and graded once grading has been done. The driveway is fairly flat, so to keep the area in front of the barn and to work the driveway in with that, I believe that the slopes to the left of this photograph in the area of where the barn is being posed were created to accommodate the driveway.
The area for the proposed garage is in the general vicinity where the 2 individuals are standing in the photograph? or
Yes,
just
that is
beyond
correct.
that? And how about photograph B?
Photograph B is a little bit closer. It is almost directly across from the barn. The vehicle at the back is at the end of the driveway. You can see on the left these wooden railroad ties. That is the area of the raised beds that are shown on the plan. So directly beyond that area of the beds is where the proposed where the garage is being proposed.
And then just turning to photo C, A6C, could you describe that?
That is an area taken pretty much where the garage is being proposed, looking back down to the west, down the driveway, to show the adjacent slopes. But the photograph where we're standing is right where the garage was being proposed.
Now, flipping back to A5.
Just 1 second. I'm looking at the plan, and with squinting and so forth, I can see the yellow line, but it's not that clear. You have a clearer plan, a little bit better, the larger plan, and then the proposed work area, which I don't think you put the proposed work area in.
That proposed work area is sort of a point of focus on the overall plan to show the general location. On the second sheet that you probably have there, that area in yellow around the building is shown as the area of disturbance.
Okay, no, I can see it, and I can see it on this. It's just, well, I guess then we'll tie it to the A5 exhibit and people.
A4.
A4 exhibit. and people-
A3 is the existing plan, and David just put a box just to focus your attention to the general area.
Yeah.
And A4, and correct me if I'm wrong, David, is the
Yeah, here it
proposed
is.
plan, and the yellow dotted line is the actual area that would be disturbed, correct?
Yes, we're showing grading around there, and the disturbance associated with that is included within the...
Okay, so it's A4 controls.
Right. Now,
Mr. Chairman, if I could, George, just, could you double-check the area of disturbance? You have 2,500 square feet as an acre. It doesn't seem correct.
I believe there, the 2,500 square feet on, what, A4?
A4.
Correct.
Is shown as 0.059 acres.
But
The plan that was just handed out has 1.05.
Yeah, that's what I was showing you earlier, David. There was a
I don't know what,
typo on it, I think.
Yeah.
The version that I had. This,
the correct number is 0.059.
see here.
George, can you tell us what's changed? In our packets, we got these really big plans, and these errors don't appear on there. So what's different about, other than size and typos, of what you just put into your exhibit package? So we have these really big ones that came.
I must have made a mistake when I printed my exhibit package. I must have printed an earlier version that I didn't realize they must have corrected these mistakes. So we better go by the ones that you have there.
Which are fortunately a lot easier to read as well, so they have a lot of advantages. Yeah, we have this one and this one.
Yeah, nothing has changed except that conversion to acreage.
Okay, so then we will,
I apologize for that. I see what the confusion now. I think I printed an earlier PDF version for my exhibit package.
yeah, okay. So this becomes the correct A5, the large plan,
A4.
A4 rather. I'm sorry.
A5 is some photographs.
So the only correction to the big one is that second area calculation. Not the calculation, but the statement in acreage. No, it's not. But you were saying it's .03, and
It
this
should
is
be,
0.3.
yeah, I missed a decimal point.
So that's the only error.
Yes.
Otherwise, this is as it should be then.
Right. So the actual numbers were correct. It was just the conversion to acreage, so. So David, there's a earth disturbance of 2575, and I guess not all of that is steep slope.
That is correct.
So you can see in the gold box, some of the areas are not labeled in pink or colored in pink. So that's why the disturbance area is larger than the area of steep slope disturbance.
That is correct.
So you can see in the gold box, some of the areas are not labeled in pink or colored in pink. So that's why the disturbance area is larger than the area of steep slope disturbance. So that's why the disturbance area is larger than the area of steep slope disturbance. Are you with me? Turning to Exhibit A5, which we had skipped. These are a couple historic photos that Mr. Totes, the architect, had given us of the barn before it was converted to a dwelling. David, have you examined these photographs?
Yes, I've looked at them.
And can you comment, especially, I guess, on the bottom photograph? Does that show the general area where we would be working today? And does it show it differently than it is today?
The general area where we're working today is directly across from the, up pretty much where the people are standing, the two people in the photograph. You can see the ramp to the barn, which is down further along the driveway. So as you get into the vicinity of where these people are standing, a little bit to the right there is the general area of where the garage is being proposed. So you can see in this photograph that the area where these trees are is where the buildings are. So a lot of earth moving has taken place to put the driveway in and to convert the buildings, to convert the area to construct the buildings. So whatever, I mean, this is showing a somewhat of a gentle slope through here. It's almost impossible to tell what the degree of slope is, but certainly if you go back to the engineering plan, you can see where we have a sloped area, a flat area for the driveway, and then another flat area for the dwelling, which really isn't represented in the photograph.
And if you compare the photo, say, at A6A, or maybe even better, A6B, that is showing sort of an embankment next to the extended driveway. And then if you contrast that with the bottom photo on A5, that's kind of showing that area much flatter. No embankment, no extended driveway, correct?
Correct.
Now, if the board were to approve the requested variance for the disturbance of the man-made slopes, will a grading permit application and plan need to be filed with the township engineer?
Yes.
And on behalf of the applicant, do we agree to accept that, as we're required to do actually by the code, but that is a condition that we would need to follow to submit that and get the proper grading permit?
Yes.
And as part of that process, ensure that the slopes are properly stabilized and proper erosion control measures are taken?
As part of the grading permit plan, we're required to show erosion controls and stabilization of the disturbed area as part of our construction activities.
And in your opinion, will the alteration of this area have any detrimental impact on any neighboring properties or the general public health, safety, and welfare?
I can't see that happening.
That's all I have.
And you would also, this grading would be done specifically to the satisfaction of the township engineer?
Yes.
Is this the only evidence you're putting in?
Yes, we do have.
Don't you want to put in evidence of hardship?
I think we have covered that. I can have Mr. Totes come on if the board would like that.
I mean, it's your case. I just think if you want a variance, you may want to put in something on the record on hardship.
Sure. I think the plans show, and I will call Mr. Totes to talk about that, but the plans show the existing improvements on the property as well as the slopes, and you can see that how these features dictate the location that we have chosen. I'll ask Mr. Totes to come up and be sworn, and he can talk about those features and how they have directed us to this location for the garage, essentially being the unique physical circumstances that caused the need for the variance.
There you are. You do solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth.
I do.
State your full name and spell it, please.
My name is John, John Totes, Toates.
And John, I have a copy of some biographical materials for you that I would like to mark as, I guess it's Exhibit A8. Is this a summary of your professional experience and qualifications?
Yes, it is.
I'll hand this up to the board. And are you a licensed architect?
Yes, I am.
And could you briefly describe your professional experience?
Yes, I'm a graduate of Syracuse University in 1992 with a bachelor's in architecture. I am currently licensed in the state of Pennsylvania and have been so since 1995, I believe.
I'd like to offer John as an expert in architecture.
Accepted.
John, are you the architect for this project?
Yes, I am.
And as such, you're familiar with the property?
Yes, I am.
And did you design the proposed garage?
Yes, I did.
And did you select the location for the garage?
Yes, I did.
In your opinion, are there physical circumstances and conditions of the property that cause the need to locate the garage in this area of man-made slopes?
Yes, there are.
And could you explain your opinion in that regard?
Certainly. The existing property is quite unique in its configuration because it is entered via a shared driveway off of South Valley Forge Road. The Y of the driveway, where it splits to drop down to a approach to the front of the house, and then splits to the left, which takes it back to the garage area where we are proposing an additional garage. That Y actually occurs outside the property boundaries. So the locations of a possible garage, in order to reduce the amount of disturbance on the property and keep the driveways where they are and not increase the impervious covers, is limited to the stretch of driveway that is here to the south. That is closer to the stream and almost adjacent to the riparian setback. To the north of that, there's a large mature tree, as well as the proximity to the historic barn, which we would prefer. We don't want to put a secondary accessory structure in front of the primary structure. When we go down the other driveway, the land to the left is not deep enough to accommodate a garage without violating the side yard setback. We then have a 34-inch mature tree that is in an area where we are borderline steep slope, which we want to preserve and not detrimentally affect. We then have this area where the planting beds occur, the area that the proposed garage would go, which while it does disturb what we see as these man-made slopes, does not affect any mature trees. The disturbance is the least that it's possible. If we continue back along the driveway, we again run into a situation where we run into no clearances to side yard setbacks, as well as we would still be affecting steep slopes. So we looked at the areas on the property, where would the garage go, where the least amount of disturbance would go, the greatest convenience, and the least amount of detrimental impact both to the site but also to the visual guidelines of the existing structures on the property, as well as neighbors uphill and downhill.
Can I ask a point of clarification? Is this one residential unit, all of this? In other words, what is this converted stone barn?
Yeah.
Is that a separate living unit, or is that part?
I'll clarify slightly from what Mr. Fiorello described, because it's a little bit confusing. The historic barn property is right here, okay, and that is a single-family residential unit. The second structure in the back is designed and styled as a barn as well, but that was constructed as an accessory structure, garage, and functions as a garage and supportive pool house functions to the pool. It is not a residence. It's not.
So the property has a garage?
The property does have a garage. Yes, it does.
What's the reason for this additional garage?
The clients would like to have additional garage space.
I'm talking about a hardship. Is there a hardship that means that they have to have another 40-foot wide garage in addition to the garage they have?
Yeah, our position on that is it's a dimensional variance, so the garage is a permitted use. It complies with all of the other requirements. So, you know, we believe that being as a permitted use under the Hertzberg doctrine, there's a much lesser burden for a variance. We have a right to put another garage on
But
this
you
property.
need a hardship of some sort.
Well, the hardship is what we've spoken about, that there's no other location. We're entitled to have a garage. It's a permitted accessory use. There's no rule that says you can only have one garage or you can only have a 3-car garage and not a 4-car garage. So then the question is, if that's a permitted use, where can it go? And is there a hardship on the land, which we believe there is? The features of the land dictate where the garage is going, what Mr. Totes had talked about. I think the other thing we would ask the board to consider is that these are man-made slopes, and the board has consistently granted approval for those. I almost view it as a de minimis kind of thing, being that they're man-made and not natural. And the board has granted other approvals for that.
We've never granted an approval on the grounds that they were man-made. Let's make that clear. There's only one exception in our code for that, and that deals with when you made the slopes in order to comply with certain provisions of the grading
Right.
ordinance. So the hardship isn't that it doesn't have a garage. The hardship is that they want an extra garage. You're right, you can build a garage, but you can't build it anywhere except where you will violate the steep slope restrictions. So the question is, do you have enough of a hardship to justify a second garage that destroys or alters steep slopes? That's really the crux of the question.
Right.
You're saying that the basis of the hardship is that that the garage isn't enough, that the house can't be reasonably used as a house without a second garage of these dimensions? Because remember, we have to grant the minimum relief necessary.
Right.
So this house cannot be reasonably used as a single-family residence with the existing garage plus this garage of this size.
Well, I
placed
think that's too hard of a test for a dimensional variance. I don't think the dimensional variance cases make you prove that you
there. This
have
dimensional, this is steep slope. You're not asking to change.
steep slope, in my opinion, is dimensional. Our use is permitted. We're allowed to have accessory garages. We could have as many as we wanted, theoretically. So the use is allowed. So I don't believe the dimensional variance case makes you prove that you don't have any use of the land, any reasonable use.
Mr. Solicitor, do you agree that a steep slope variance is a dimensional variance?
I think it is probably a dimensional variance because but however, I would have to take issue with the characterization of dimensional variances as, you know, is almost de minimis, even if it, you segregate man-made steep slopes, which our code doesn't do. Dimensional variances, when Hertzberg came out, there was a flurry of cases by the Commonwealth Court which turned down dimensional variances and said, dimensional requirements have a lower standard of hardship, but they're not a free fire zone. And there's still a severe quantum of hardship to be established. Not as severe as a use variance, but still, nevertheless, it's not a trivial matter.
And I don't mean to trivialize it. I believe that the features we spoke of are unique physical circumstances of the property that leave us with no alternative but to look to these man-made steep slopes. We've talked about, you can see the irregular shape of the property, the way the driveway lays out, the historic structure, the trees. One of the reasons for granting a variance is to avoid, undue impacts like that, to force somebody to build something too close to a historic structure or to cut down mature trees, things of that nature. So we would ask you to use your discretion to allow us to do this project in a more sensible way. I think that's one of the powers of granting a dimensional variance. And I do believe there are slopes and there are slopes. When you look at these photographs, I think the board does have the power to take into account what these slopes are. Are they man-made or are they natural? And to take that into account, look at the photographs here. And it is almost a de minimis kind of thing. There are cases that say you don't just look at the size with a de minimis variance, you look at the overall effect. And the overall effect is there's really not going to be any effect with these slopes because they are man-made and the area of disturbance is so small.
I'd have to take issue with, respectfully, with this being a de minimis variance. The relief being requested, I don't think it is de minimis. It's a pure Hertzberg dimensional variance and not de minimis.
Can I ask you about the neighborhood? I've looked at the photographs. It doesn't look like there's any neighbor that's terribly close to where this garage is going to be built. It's a little hard to tell, but
John, could you talk about that?
Certainly.
excuse me.
This property is adjacent and part of the Ravenscliff subdivision. That's when it was created.
Ravenscliff is up above.
Ravenscliff,
behind it.
well, it actually kind of wraps around
Maybe see it on here.
because Julep Run is part of Ravenscliff, as well as uphill. So everything is running steeply from uphill down through this property. When Ravenscliff was subdivided, and the woman that purchased this property, she was the one that converted the barn originally in 1979, I believe, to the primary use, was vehemently opposed to the Ravenscliff development, didn't want to be part of it, which is why she did not connect Julep Run, and heavily planted the northern property line with pine trees to screen out the rest of the Ravenscliff houses as much as possible. As a result, both because of that, but even because of the natural topography and the layout of the area, it was nearly impossible to provide even photographs of the adjacent properties because they cannot be seen from anywhere. When we designed this garage, because of the slope that we have here, we specifically designed the garage to be a bank barn style, a run-in shed style garage, which complements the historic nature of the property, as does the St. David's Episcopal Church up the hill. It is cut into the hillside, so basically all the bulk, or 90% of the bulk of the building, is absorbed into the hillside. So any view of the garage from the uphill, which is probably the most visible location, is going to be a cedar roof. That's it. The garage doors would be facing the existing garage barn. So we've made a distinct effort to locate the garage in such a way that we don't have to increase any parking area, we can reuse what's there, and the building really works with the landscape as opposed to against the landscape.
And we haven't gotten any kind of letters for or against from the neighbors, not that I can tell.
Obviously,
Unless somebody's here tonight, I guess, but.
Yeah, obviously, the required notifications were made.
Right.
None were. Did you talk to your neighbor right up the street?
I talked to my neighbor, no, this way, down.
Down, yeah, oh.
Just below Julep Run.
Okay, this property right here. Property owner. Quick question, is everyone familiar when I refer to a run-in style shed garage, roofline, form, volume? Again, making sure that you understand what is being proposed here is a very much not a typical garage. It's not a gable form pressing out. It is the eave line facing the garageway, natural materials, stone base, wood cedar roof, cedar siding. It's meant to blend and go away.
Any magic to 3 cars as opposed to 2? Getting back to the concept of minimum relief required.
The clients would like to have the ability to have the 3 cars if the board feels that there is the gold number is less than the length that we have proposed right now. We could certainly consider that.
How many cars does the existing garage hold?
1.5. It is a undersized 2-car garage, unless you drive minis, which is reasonable, which we understand.
Counsel, you want to go through Exhibit 7? You want to go through the appeal at all?
I just was giving those for the convenience of the
I
board.
mean, it's interesting that one of the people on the panel
Pardon?
approved it.
Yes, those were the, I seem to have a knack lately for getting man-made steep slope cases, and those were the recent ones that I've had that the board has approved. A7A was the original steep slope relief for the Atterbury subdivision. A7B was some man-made steep slopes at the Radnor Walk subdivision. Several new homes were built there. A7C was 120, 124 Bloomingdale Avenue, where there would be 3 new townhomes and 2 new single-family dwellings. And A7D was a follow-up to A7A. That was 113 Dovecote Lane, which was one of the lots in the Atterbury subdivision. There was steep slope, man-made steep slope relief granted there for basically landscaping improvements. You might remember it was like a beautiful man-made waterfall and things like that again.
But none of these affect this property?
Pardon?
None of those decisions relate to this property?
No, of course not.
And they're attached, for what purpose are they attached?
Just to show that there's been a history of approving variances for man-made slopes.
Not because they were man-made. Can you show me anything in any of these decisions that says that's why they were granted, because they were man-made?
Well, I handled them, and I know the testimony that was presented, and I believe it was an important factor. And if you read the transcripts of all of those cases, the engineers testified extensively that they were man-made slopes, and we felt that was important in looking at the impact of the variance and also on the variance factors like detrimental impact and things like that.
Did the board ever say that it was important? Since my name was evoked as having approved some of these, I would say that the board never used that as a deciding factor in any case. You put on your cases as you are now, but...
Okay, all right, we're good. Thank you now. We don't have to follow precedent anyway. Are there any other questions from the board? Yep. Do you have anything else to put on before I see if there's anyone in the audience?
That's it. I would ask that my exhibits be made part of the record.
Of course. Is there anyone here that would like to give the board their thoughts on this particular matter? Thank you. Come on up.
Shall I swear you in?
Absolutely.
Sir, if you'll raise your right hand, you do solemnly swear or affirm this testimony you're about to give will be the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth.
I do.
State your full name for me and spell it.
Dan Webster. Do I need to spell that?
No.
242 Ravenscliff Road. I've spoken at many meetings for the school board and the township. I've never been sworn in before, so I'm always honest, but I will be honest tonight, too. With a name like Dan Webster, I have to be honest. And I have to start out by saying I've never met my neighbor down the hill before, so nice to meet you. I never had heard about this project before either until a couple days ago. My wife had told me that there was this appeal hearing tonight, and I'm missing my son's band performance over at the high school to be here to find out. I really came to find out more about what this is. I live directly uphill from this property, and I'm.
On that, there's a yellow thing.
Yeah,
Can you show that?
unfortunately, this doesn't appear. Let me see here. I guess this would be my property right here. I think the red area on here is the applicant's property. This area, this large area that's shown is common space, which is steeply sloped. And I don't know what your definition of steeply sloped or not steeply sloped is, but I can tell you if you walked from the applicant's property up to my property, any one of you would be winded when you got there. It's a pretty steep slope.
You're 242 Ravenscliff?
242 Ravenscliff, yes. I have a flag lot, so I come out the back there. It's a pretty large property. I think it's a couple acres.
Thank you.
So I wanted to let you know that, first of all, I didn't come here to make a big deal about this. I came here to find out what this project meant, because it will certainly have an impact on what I see from my property. We have a lovely view looking down the hill, over the applicant's property, and across the valley to the Harrison estate. There are, as the applicant or the applicant's attorney said, there are a number of pine trees, which I guess is what these are here. I would be concerned if those were disturbed in any way. I've heard discussion of a mature tree somewhere, I guess it's this one here. And I don't know what the difference is between, technically a mature tree and a regular tree, but there are a lot of trees there. The homeowners association has guidelines as to what can be done and approvals that need to be received before projects like this can be undertaken in Ravenscliff. I have no idea. We haven't been notified by Ravenscliff's homeowners association about this, and they usually do notify the local abutting property owners, but maybe they have those approvals. I wanted you to know that it is a steep slope. To the extent that this, I think people should be able to do on their property what they're permitted to do. Whether I like it or not, I probably wouldn't like looking down on the big roof of a 1,000-square-foot garage. I was surprised to hear that the hardship is that there's no other place on the property to put a second garage, but if the applicant needs another garage, I don't really want to stand in the way of that, but I would certainly like to minimize the impact of what now is a very nice view that I have from my property. When they say it's going to be built into the slope, that makes me feel better. I assume that a garage probably has a 10 or 12-foot rear wall. I don't know how much into the slope it will be built. Regardless, it'll be a large roof. It'll be cedar, which is required in the neighborhood. Over time, that would weather and darken, so it would start to blend in more with the property. The applicant has a very nice-looking property. You can, despite what either the attorney or the architect said, you actually can see properties. I mean, I don't know how I would be able to see their property, but they wouldn't be able to see properties up the hill. So there are properties that are visible. Those historical photos are, by definition, they are historical. And it doesn't show the mature growth that's popped up in that area now. Whether or not the slope that's being built on was man-made or not, I don't know. I can tell you for sure that the hill between our two properties was not man-made. You'd never find enough earth to make that hill. So this lower slope may be man-made. There's also a little bit of an issue in this area. Well, it's a big issue with runoff, as we have throughout Radnor. And this applicant experiences that, I'm sure, because there's a creek that runs right past their property. I believe it's their property, into the duck ponds they're commonly known as the duck ponds. And Ravenscliff is currently spending somewhere in the neighborhood of a couple $100,000 to dredge out all those duck ponds because of all the runoff and the sediment that goes into them. But there is fast-moving water through there. I don't know if 1,000 square feet of impervious roof has much of an impact on that. I suspect it has some impact. It won't impact me because I'm up the hill. But I thought you should know about that. So that's all I have to say. If there are any sort of renderings of what this would look like built into the hill as an abutting property owner, and probably the one that would be most impacted, I'd like to see those.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Mr. Webster, if the applicant would agree, as I think they have, that they would agree on the record that they're not going to remove any of those pine trees, would that be of comfort to you?
It would certainly be of comfort to me. It would be of great discomfort to me if they did remove any of those pine trees. And the homeowners association does have rules about removing groupings of mature trees. I suspect these are large trees, so I suspect that each of these trees is over a foot in diameter. And I forget what the specific rule is in the homeowners association, but there are restrictions against that.
Is this property subject to that homeowners association?
I believe so.
Okay, thank you.
But if the trees are left and the property is set into the hillside, then it will hopefully not have a big visual impact on me, but it's a big roof. it's a big roof.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you for your time.
Could I have Mr. Totes briefly address some of Mr. Webster's concerns, and then one of the owners would like to also address them?
Sure.
Great, thank you.
First, maybe you can, did you hear where Mr. Webster lives?
Yeah, he indicated it's property number 242, which is, yes, it is directly uphill from their property. The concern I would have, I'm sure. Mr.
Sir,
Webster
please
has-
use a mic. There are people at home watching.
I'm sorry. From Mr. Webster's house up the hill, clearly, I understand he has concern about the potential visual impact of the garage to his view shed. From when I have been down in this area of the property walking around, I cannot see his house at all until I am beyond the pine tree line. These are not deciduous trees, these are pine trees, and they are mature trees. So the view up the hill is probably equal to the view down the hill. So I think the view of the garage, if Mr. Webster is concerned about that, is going to be something that's negligible. The concerns that he has about the homeowners association, the first litmus test we have is to get through this zoning variance to decide whether we can even build a garage before going to the homeowners association. We don't want to waste the homeowners association's time if it's not something we can't achieve. His concerns about the runoff are handled through the standard ordinances for stormwater management, which has already been engineered and presented.
And we're not planning to take down those trees that he would like to remain, correct?
That is correct. None of the large pine trees are being taken down for the proposed garage.
I would point out that, Mr. Webster, nothing the board does interferes or abrogates or compromises the private rights of the homeowners association. And we're not allowed to get into that. We don't try issues of title, of private rights, and so forth. So anything this board would do, there's private rights of the homeowners association which have to be complied with. The applicant would have to do that, and our decision would not abrogate that.
And we're obviously planning to do that if we get that far. I'd like to have the applicant and one of the owners, Mr. Rabauer, sworn in as well.
Raise your right hand. You do solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth.
Yes, I do.
And state your full name and spell it, please.
Franz Rabauer, Franz, last name Rabauer. I just want to say that with response to the trees, this property was purchased and converted 40 years ago. The woman who did this planted all of those trees that surround this property, so they're roughly 40 years old. And I just spent thousands of dollars trying to save 2 white pines that I had to take down because they died. So I don't want to take any more trees down. And the reason we chose this spot is because we didn't have to remove any of the trees. The tree out front is a 40-year-old maple. I'm not taking it down. The other tree is a ginkgo tree. The berries suck, but the tree's beautiful. So this was the one spot where we didn't have to disturb any of those trees, and that's a big concern of mine. And I just wanted to state that.
Thank you.
And I guess just the last thing I'll say, I don't want to go back and forth with Mr. Cutler, but I did notice in 2 of the decisions, A7A and B, it does reference man-made slopes, but yes, it references them.
I know.
You know, this is my last hearing as a member of this board, and you had to dig me, right?
I did not intend to.
Are there any other questions for the board? Does anyone like to make some comments, put a proposal, make a motion?
To get the ball rolling, I'll make a motion that we grant relief from section 280-112.d relating to steep slopes in order to allow the project to go forward as presented for the plans.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there any discussion on the matter?
Would the proposal include that they have to do the gradings, subject to the approval of the township engineer, and not remove the trees, and nothing which is the legal result, impacts any rights of private contract on the property?
If the solicitor thinks it would be clearer to elaborate on the motion, that would be fine.
Fine. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against?
I'm against.
Any abstentions?
I'm also against.
The motion's carried. Congratulations.
I'm sorry?
Who said I'm also against?
John Riley?
Mr. Riley?
Yeah.
You also-
Yeah.
Talk to the hand.
One more meeting,
Talk to the hand.
and then you get to sit there.
Hey, don't let the man put you down. Come on.
Warming up for next month. Here we all.
And I waited.
By the process of elimination, I guess we're next.
George, do you mind?
Good to see you. How you been doing?
Thanks.
I knew this
All
was
right.
your last night. I was going to wait till the end to give you the business about that.
I'm surprised you didn't wait to come in January when I'm gone. That would have been the smarting.
All right.
We'd rather deal with experience.
The final matter for the night and for the year, the applicants Gary and Christine F. McLean and Mark and Iris Needleman, property located at 503 Conestoga Road and zoned R3, seek relief under 280-112, primarily subsection D8 of the zoning code, to allow applicants to cut into an embankment and construct a retaining wall. Applicant contends that the retaining wall is permitted as of right under section 280-112 D8 by special exception under 280-112N or by variance under section 280-101B of the code. Counsel?
Thank you. Good evening, members of the board. I'm Edward Flail, here for the applicants who've been identified. I have one witness tonight, which is Mr. McLean. Gary McLean is a builder and developer in this area. He is experienced with the property. He's done many projects. We'll give some testimony on that. But he's here to testify both as a fact and, if accepted, as an expert witness. I thought I'd give you a little outline of what brings us here and how we got here. The applicant purchased 503 Conestoga Road in 2004 and subdivided it into two lots. One at 503, it maintained the street number of 503, which contains the pre-existing house and which consists of a one-story house, single-family house with an attached garage.
Is that on that map, Ed?
It is.
Where?
This is it here. That's it. This house was originally built by the D'Antonio family in the 50s. Mr. D'Antonio owned Wayne Trucking Company. My father was a builder, developer, and used him for years. We lived around the corner on Parks Run Lane. I grew up with the two D'Antonio boys, so I know, I've been on this property many times. I know when it was built. And the relevance of that for later on is the fact that it predates the steep slope ordinances of Radnor Township in their various forms. But to continue on, Mr. McLean also developed the subdivided lot, which I believe has a street number 505, I'm going to refer to it as that, which is between 503 and the P&W Trail. This property sits on the Township building side of the S-curves on Conestoga Road. It's across the street from the parking lot for the use of the trail, and it's in an area generally of various sizes and values of single-family houses. And that's what Mr. McLean and Mr. Needleman developed on at 505 Conestoga Road. And that house was sold, conveyed, and so now we have the situation where the grading on 505 is impacting what happens on 503.
Where is the other house? Could you show us?
If you're looking, actually it would be this way. It's over here. Wait, I'm sorry. This is Conestoga Road, it's over here.
That's the P&W there, Conestoga Road.
As you're now holding it, Conestoga Road's at the bottom,
Yeah, right.
and the P&W is running up the right.
Would be to the left. It would be on the second plan where it says grass, it's right.
Over here?
Yes, that's where it is.
Okay. Sorry, I was confused by the plan. That's why I brought Mr. McLean. The applicant is now in the process of renovating the existing house and adding a second floor. They're not changing the footprint. They're not adding on to the structure that was there, except vertically. And in the process of building the house, they experienced a problem with water seeping into the basement. So, and of course, this entire area, both lots, are sloped. Whether they meet the 20% requirement in various areas or not, they're sloped, so the water runs towards Conestoga Road on both properties. The applicant, of course, applied for and was granted all of the necessary permits to proceed with their project. And then when they discovered this problem, they applied for a grading permit so they could build a retaining wall in the back of the house to stop the water flow so it would not seep into the basement. And that is why we're here. And oddly enough, they had done the same thing on the house that I called 505. I think that's going to be an incorrect number, but and they had to do the same thing there, and they got through with they got their grading permit with no objection from the township. But when they went in for this one, township said, no, you got to go to the zoning hearing board to request relief.
Mr. Flail, do you know whether the conditions that bring you here this evening existed on the other property that caused the problem, or did not cause the problem when they applied for the grading permit on the other property? I mean, do you know that the conditions were the same on both properties? I mean, you seem to be making a point about, well, the other one got it, and we applied this time, and now we...
Well, I am making that point.
Do you have evidence that you can enter into the record that would indicate that?
Well, Mr. McLean can testify.
I mean, you're
to
testifying,
that.
is my point. If you have evidence from that file which would indicate that the same kind of conditions existed on the other property that exist here, that might be instructive to the board. Otherwise, you're testifying.
Well, but I'm just giving a statement as to what we intend to show. If we don't show what I say, then of course you can slap my wrist for that. But I've been over this pretty thoroughly with Mr. McLean, and he was the builder-developer of the other house, so he can tell you from his own experience what happened there. Now, I mentioned that this house was built in the 1950s, and the D'Antonio family lived there up until, I think, 1993, and it was sold to another family, and the applicant bought it from the other family. During that entire period of time, there have been no zoning approvals sought or needed, as far as we know. That the house has really not changed in any significant way. Still the same footprint, still the same walls. It's basically the same house, except for the changes that Mr. McLean's proposal has dictated. We believe that the applicant is entitled to a grading permit in accordance with the plans that have been submitted with the application. And by the way, this is a copy these are copies of the plans that you already have in the file. I'm not going to present, as far as I know, any other physical evidence here tonight that is not already in your possession. But we feel we're entitled to this by right because the letter of section 280.12 D8 says that you can disturb the steep slope in order to construct a retaining wall. And that's exactly what we intend to do to solve the problem. If the board decides that relief cannot be granted by right, we believe it can and should be granted by variance under 280.101B of the code because the entire lot is sloped, especially in the buildable area. It contains a lawfully existing house which doesn't conform to the steep slope regulations because they were adopted and I think amended long after the house was built. So it's a non-conforming structure on a legal lot. The only, and we'll have testimony on this, but the only way you could solve it any other way from what we propose to do would be to move the house, which I think by definition would be a hardship right there. We're not, what we're doing doesn't change the foundation at all. It doesn't change the footprint of the house at all. It's just a situation that has arisen that's causing the basement to flood on occasions. Maybe it might even be doing that today because of all the rain we've had. We'll present testimony that the proposed retaining wall represents a solution to the runoff problem, the best location with the least intrusion into the steep slope area. It will help rather than harm the surface water flow because the retaining wall will hold some of the water and let it infiltrate into the ground rather than just run over the surface and down towards the street. And with that, I'd like to present Mr. McLean. Sure.
First, we ought to label your exhibits.
All right, I was going to do that as we presented them, but that's your preference, I'll do it now.
The application would be A1.
Okay.
Deed would be A2. The 3 sheets of the plan would be A3.
Okay.
They're all stapled together. And the photographs, that one could be A4.
A4. And what did you mention A2 was, the deed?
The deed, yes.
All right.
This photograph, A5.
That's fine.
This photograph would be
A6.
Yeah.
Okay. And the last
And
one?
last but not least, A7.
Okay. Okay. I've marked my copies of the exhibits in conformity with that. Is it all right if I start with Mr. McLean now?
Yes.
Could you swear him in, please?
You do solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth.
I do.
And state your full
Thank you.
name, please.
My name is Gary McLean.
And Mr. McLean, where do you live?
I live on Harrison Road, approximately a quarter mile from this location,
How long have you lived there?
since 1954.
And what is your business?
I buy old buildings and renovate them, primarily for apartments, but sometimes single-family homes for resale.
And approximately how many projects of that type have you done over the years?
About 25.
You do any new construction?
I have, not a lot of it, but I like apartments, but that market kind of dried up. It got too expensive to do in Wayne.
I'm going to show you what's been marked A2 and ask you if you can identify that as the deed to the premises at 503.
Yes, this is the deed.
All right. And when did you acquire the property?
Per your testimony, you said 204. I would say that's as close as I can recall.
And you purchased it from Humberto Gonzalez and Angela L. Martinez?
That's correct.
Okay. And you've owned the property ever since then?
Yes, I own it with a partner.
Mr. Needleman, right?
Correct.
Mr. and Mrs. Needleman, Mr. and Mrs. McLean. Now, after you bought the property in 2004, what did you do?
I built the house. I subdivided it. I came in here for a subdivision, was approved, and I built the house right here, which is A6. And it is built right about here.
You want to use the handheld?
Sure. I built the new construction house, A6, right about here, and then since it was new construction, I had to meet all the stormwater management criteria, and Yerkes designed 2 retaining walls in the back so they could direct the flow of the water so I could meet the stormwater management criteria.
And were those retaining walls built?
They were, and they are photographed in A7.
So the retaining walls that are currently in that property were part of the plans that you submitted to the township to get the
For
permit?
approval for the grading permit, yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Okay.
And did you build that house that's depicted in A6 with all the requisite permits from the Township of Radnor?
Oh, absolutely.
Including a grading permit?
That's correct.
Did you have to seek any kind of zoning relief in order to proceed with that project?
Just for the subdivision. After that, it was just a building permit and the stormwater management.
You didn't come before this board?
That's correct.
Okay.
All right. At any time after you built the house, did the township ever tell you they made a mistake?
No.
Okay. And did you, when you submitted your plans for the renovation here, did you include any retaining walls in it?
In the plan for this house?
Yeah.
Yes, I did.
You did. Okay, thank you.
And with respect to 503, the remaining 503, is the retaining wall that you submitted the same as the retaining wall you proposed to build now? In other words, is that the same? Has it been redesigned at all from the plans that were submitted before?
No, the retaining wall that is on these plans is the original from day one, designed by Yerkes. The one next door was designed by Yerkes, but it's curved where this one is straight. That's really the only difference.
Right, and these properties are both, the now 2 properties are both on areas where they're sloped. I mean, their
That's correct.
entire width and length, they're sloped.
That's correct, but
I'm sorry, excuse me. Have you been approved as an expert?
I have not.
Okay,
Well,
thank you.
we'll offer him as an expert, I think is based on...
As a civil engineer?
No?
No, he's a builder developer.
So his observations with respect to slope, whether it be steep or not, are observations, but not the opinion of an expert.
That's correct. My observations are even more limited than that. They're really just limited
Keep
to
talking.
these two sites. I'm very familiar with these two sites, and that's my experience with steep slopes.
Well, can you show the board where on the property are the 20% grade steep slopes?
The areas that
The
are...
dark shaded areas?
Dark shaded.
Okay.
And in this particular house, we had to dig into the dark shaded area more than we're going to be digging into this one.
And were these plans prepared by Yerkes at your request and with your participation?
Yes, they were.
And were you involved in it from step one till the final step?
From day one, yes, sir.
All right. Okay. Now, what happened that just give the board a description of the events that led to the fact that we are here tonight?
Well, to start, I've played in this house in the 60s because the D'Antonio boys and I were friends, so I played in this house and I'm familiar with it. And the basement has always been wet. It's wet today.
Did you ever see him there?
I never see him there, no.
But we were friends growing up, too. I lived across the street from him, so.
But I did the subdivision here, and that was successful. I did not want to move the house because I did not want to have to go through the stormwater management that I had to go through here, which entailed digging a giant hole about 65 feet by 35 feet in the front yard, putting in giant pipes, tons of stone, an overflow valve that actually ran down into this property. It cuts right across this driveway and goes into a stream here. And it looked like a huge expense that I didn't want to do, so we kept the original footprint and decided to just go up and built the same walls and came in for our permit, and they said, no, it's not an engineering issue anymore, it's a zoning issue. And that's how I ended up here.
Did they explain to you why it was now a zoning issue?
No.
Did you just have any discussions with any township officials about the whys and wherefores of needing this
No, I mean,
application?
they said it was a zoning issue, and, you know, I had to go back to Yerkes and tell them, you know, this is what I have to do at some stage. But weather-wise, it was better for me to start the construction of the house, trying to get it closed up before winter comes. And so we focused on that instead of on the grading permit.
All right. So when did you actually come in and ask for the grading permit?
I don't have any idea.
All right. How much of the second floor had been added at that point?
Almost none.
All right. Was the permit, or was the denial of the permit precipitated by a letter or any kind of a notification?
No, I went in for a grading permit, and they told me, you can't get a grading permit without a zoning hearing, and that's where it was left.
All right. And then we subsequently filed this application about which we're here tonight.
That's correct.
Now, can you show the board exactly where the proposed retaining wall is?
These two dark lines here.
And how far away are they from the house at the closest point?
23.8 feet.
And
At the widest part, 33.2.
And the second wall is how many feet behind that?
It
doesn't show just approximately.
It doesn't look like it shows I would have estimated about 12 feet.
Now, these walls haven't been constructed at all?
No, they have not. That's why we're still getting a fair amount of water into the basement.
And how much water is going into the basement? Is it puddling? Is it flooding? How would you describe
What it
that?
does is it wets the walls, it perks up through the sump pump. If the sump pump would fail because of electricity failure, since it's a construction site, we don't have the electricity on all the time. It'll bubble up from the sump pump. Mold is becoming a problem. We've had to have the mold remediated once during the construction phase because I didn't want any issues with my employees, having to deal with mold.
The house is not finished as we speak?
It is not
All
finished.
right. No one's living there?
No.
In doing the work that you're doing there, have you made any changes to the footprint of the house?
No changes. We have reduced some of the impervious cover. We eliminated some of the concrete pads that they had placed around the house.
Where were they?
I don't actually recall, but I think we removed this piece here. And we're going to go back on it, but in the meantime, it's gone. There was some walkways in concrete that we took out, but not a lot to speak of. We haven't really changed it.
Has any of the work you've done so far changed the grade in the area of the proposed retaining walls?
No, that's negative. It's always had a paved driveway, so any vehicles that come in are driving on the pavement. So we haven't, put any ruts in the ground. We still have a real nice yard.
Excuse me, you finish your answer.
So we have not disturbed the ground yet.
And what, if any, disturbance are you going to need to make to the earth in order to construct these walls?
We're going to actually have to flatten the ground out by removing the dirt and then build the retaining walls. And what we'll accomplish is we'll actually be able to direct the stormwater around them. And we also have a proposal for a rain garden that goes over here to catch a lot of the runoff that comes off the hill.
Before we get past it, show the board where you removed earth to flatten out the land.
But we would have to remove all in here. If you look at photograph A5, you notice the slope comes right up to the back of the house.
And if you can, could you point out where on the hill and back of the house that these two walls would be?
The first retaining wall is right here, and the second retaining wall is 12 feet past it. And then this area would then be flat. This would be a yard where you could put a swing set, just have some grass.
And if permitted to proceed with the construction of retaining walls, you are aware that you would have to abide by all township building and grading codes and
Yeah, I'm familiar with the
regulations.
township's requirement. We'd have to put silt fence completely around the property. We have to put chain link fence around any of the protected trees that border the trail.
So that you're aware that if permitted to proceed by this board, you would be subject to the direction and inspections of the township, just as if they had issued a grading permit without us being here.
Yeah, there's no getting around the township. This building's, 800 yards from where we're standing. They drive by 40 times a day.
And you want to do this for your project because it'll solve a problem of water.
It solves multiple problems. It allows us to direct the water. It actually gives us a yard. If the people that buy the house have children, it's a place for them to play in the back. And I think it's going to make it a better looking property.
How's the water getting into the foundation? And is it over, under, around, or through?
Straight down right into it. it just lays up against the house, and over time, it seeps in. If you're lucky in a big storm, some of it will run around it, but not very much.
Is it seeping in down around the footings of the?
It is.
Okay. And it's not seeping in anywhere else? Like such as
It's hard to
over the wall?
tell. I mean, it's
Okay.
just wet down there.
I mean, you'll have to, square your corners with the grading and township engineer and all of that, but the retaining walls, as you point out, are permitted of right in situations where they're customarily associated, but it doesn't say they have to be associated. So I mean, I think that, there's a good argument to be made that this is permitted of right as long as you are, understand that you have to square, you have to comply with the township's other ordinances on grading and stormwater.
I believe we're past that stage with this permit. We've talked, I mean, Yerkes has anyway, talked to the township, and they went back and forth, and that's how we arrived at where we're at on these plans now. I believe without the zoning, we would have been approved.
Yeah, but we wouldn't be doing, whether it's happened or not, we're not doing that. This board is not addressing that. It's either
Right.
happened or it hasn't, but it's not for this board to rule on that.
Well, we also contend that this is our primary contention is that this is an as-right application, as-of-right application. We were actually a little surprised that we were told we had to come here, but, we're told that's what we do. So we're here asking for relief by whatever means. I mentioned in the application, part of the grounds was as a special exception, but looking over the special exception provision, not applicable. So we're not pressing that. We are pressing the by right, and in default of that, a variance.
And if the analysis were to get to the point that we looked at it as a variance case, how would you articulate the hardship?
Well, it's a it's a lawfully existing non-conforming building because it predates any regulation of steep slopes. So the house has the right to remain there. And of course, then we have the right to alleviate, or then the need to alleviate water getting into the basement. There isn't any law that would require that we move the house in order to accomplish that. It's certainly there's a lot less disturbance and obviously cheaper to do it this way, but I'm aware of no case law that would ever require that you move the building. The reason I gave the testimony about, or had Mr. McLean give testimony about the fact that they're not changing any of the basics that are there, was to sort of establish the fact that what they're doing hasn't caused this problem or made it any worse than it was before. So as another step towards the showing of a hardship, if that's necessary. A non-conforming use really provides, or property or structure really provides as a substitute for a hardship, but I think we've also got elements of hardship here that would permit us to get a variance as well.
I think that the cases sometimes blur the distinction between a standard hardship variance and a variance which is really being granted to address a non-conforming situation. But I think that the house predates the steep slope ordinance, and it has a right to be there. And given that, I think that that says a lot, provides a lot of equity in terms of they ought to be able to keep water out of the basement.
What other steps have you investigated to prevent the water coming in from the basement?
No, we haven't done any.
Okay, so being an expert builder, you're familiar with exterior drains that can be put down at the footing level to take the water out some other way?
Well, the footers are already there, so I mean, that would be a fair amount of excavation to do that. So we did not address that. We did that in the house next door when we started from scratch.
Okay, and my point in asking the question is, this board has to consider whether the relief you're requesting is appropriate. One of the aspects of hardship is there's no other way that you can accomplish what you're looking to accomplish. You're telling the board now that you haven't examined an exterior drain, which is a fairly common approach for alleviating the very condition that you're describing here.
I mean, that's why I hired Yerkes, to guide me. That's their business.
Well,
And
Yerkes
never
frankly,
mentioned
is
by
not in the business of designing systems that don't require their services. So, yes, they designed for you a very nice retaining wall system, but I'm suggesting that there are other ways of getting rid of the water that don't involve a retaining wall system. You're asking for the retaining wall, which requires relief, and I'm looking for, you're having looked at other ways of solving the problem that don't involve a variance. And I'm not hearing it.
I looked to Yerkes to give me workable solutions. This is what they came up with.
This will have the additional benefit, though, of changing the slope above the retaining walls so that the water will flatten out and seep down behind the retaining walls rather than flow over the surface. Putting a foundation drain wouldn't do anything for that situation.
But it might eliminate the water getting into the basement, which is the problem that you're bringing before.
Well, it might, but I would argue that if you put water down around the foundation, it doesn't necessarily solve the problem. You can see from the picture how close this is. It's still going to go down around the foundation. This is, in my view, would be a better solution. But I don't think...
Are you an engineer?
No, but I have been in the construction business all my life, so I know a fair amount about how to keep water off of a foundation. But I don't think the zoning law requires, first of all, I feel this is a by right application and none of this discussion, if I am right about that, none of this discussion is even relevant. But I don't think zoning requires that you choose one form of solving a problem over another, as long as it's not harmful to the surrounding, and I'm going to have him do some testimony on that, to the public or the surrounding properties.
And we can, I'm sure, get into this later, but to the extent that one of the avenues that you're looking for requires a variance and the other one doesn't, then it's incumbent upon you to show the necessary hardship for the variance.
You can make that argument if this is a variance application, but if it's a by right application, which we contend it is, then all of those issues are irrelevant. If we are considering the application as a variance problem, then it does require a hardship, but A, the nonconformity provides the hardship because it's a lawful pre-existing use, and
retaining wall is not a lawful pre-existing use. The house is, the retaining wall isn't.
Well, yes, but no, I'm not going to agree with that. First of all,
then why are you here?
Why are we here? Because we were declined a permit.
Let's move on. I think you made your point. You've only looked at one option, so that's on the record. Right. We're fine.
All right. Are you aware of any adverse impact on public health, safety, or welfare the grant of a grading permit in accordance with the plans that you have submitted to the township would have?
No, I don't know of any.
Will any neighbors be adversely affected by the issuance of a grading permit on the basis that you propose?
I don't believe so. The house that I built next door was sold to the woman I ultimately hired to design this house.
And will the retaining wall, in fact, reduce the surface runoff compared to the current conditions?
Yes.
And while we're on the subject of an underground drainage system. Are you familiar with those at all?
I put one in the house next door,
Okay.
and we still needed retaining walls.
All right, and is there any other way that you know of that you could accomplish your purpose without building a retaining wall or doing any or as much grading as short of moving the house?
No.
All right. And is there a retaining wall in the steep slope area on the house you build next door?
Yes, there's 2 of them, just like we're proposing for this house.
And where are they located in relationship to the lot at 503?
They are in this steep slope back here. And that's photographed on A7.
On A7. Did you receive a grading permit for that?
Yes,
Did you have to come before this board to get it?
I did not.
What, if any, difference do you see between the retaining walls on 503 and retaining walls on the new house you built?
I don't see any real difference other than one's straight, one's curved.
And is the retaining wall on the newer house functioning correctly? Is it?
I mean, on the new house, yes.
Yeah, all right.
The one I built over here, you mean?
Right.
Yes, that one functions fine.
No water leakage in the basement there, seepage?
No.
Okay. All right, that's all I have, unless the board has any other questions.
Do you have any letters of support from the neighbors?
I do not.
Do you have any letters of objection from any neighbors?
No, I do not.
Have you heard from anybody?
My next door neighbor is the architect on this house. She's there every day.
Well, it doesn't look like there's anyone here.
You want to move your exhibits?
Yes. Do you want to move the exhibits A1 through 7?
So moved. Are there any other questions?
I'd like to make a motion, Mr. Chairman.
Well, let's make sure that they rest in peace. Have
You just said he rested.
You rest?
Oh, yes.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
Just want to make sure.
I'd like to make a motion that the board determine that the applicant is entitled to build these retaining walls, subject to compliance with all township grading ordinances and the supervision of township employees and staff as provided for in that ordinance, that they're entitled to under section 281.12 D8 as a retaining wall. By right, and that no variance is required, and that the decision of the township office be reversed, be overruled.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yeah, hold on,
Can
sorry.
Can we have discussion about that? And this is not without reference to my opinion regarding whether relief should be granted or not, but I don't understand that reading of the section. The 281.12D lists items 1 through 7, and then 8 says structures customarily associated with the above uses such as. If the intent was to allow retaining walls, period, it, along with the other items in 8, would have just been listed. As a matter of statutory interpretation, there needs to be meaning given to the phrase. So the phrase structures customarily associated with the above uses needs to mean something, which to me limits the universe of retaining walls, et cetera, to be retaining walls associated with. And when you go through 1 through 7, to me, this does not fall under 1 through 7. It's not grazing, it's not forestry, et cetera. So I don't agree with that as a matter of interpretation of the code.
Okay, well, the reason why I said the motion the way I did was, it doesn't say structures when associated with the above uses. It's just explaining how it decided, because it doesn't list them exhaustively. It says such as. These are examples. So any structure that would customarily be associated with 1 through 7, whether it in fact is associated with 1 through 7 in a particular case, and whether it's in fact listed specifically or not, would be covered under 8. Now, if you think that's not a possible interpretation, the question is there an ambiguity? And under the law, if there's an ambiguity in the ordinance, it has to be resolved in the favor of the applicant. Is that true, Mr. Solicitor?
Yes.
Unless you think it's clear that only when they are connected with those may a retaining wall be built. And I don't see where you get that out of here. This doesn't say only when. It says customarily associated with these things and anything else that's customarily associated with the structure. Not a well-worded section, but that's what it says.
Any other discussion? In that case, I'll put it to a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Against?
No.
Abstentions? Obviously not. So carried.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This, well, actually, before we go, I just want to personally thank Noah Cutler for his service on the zoning board for the past 6 years. It's been a pleasure working with you. Learned a lot from you. I know you're already retired, but enjoy your further retirement. Thank you very much for your service.
Thank all the people that came out tonight to say goodbye.
Mr. Chairman, I too would like to express on behalf of staff the appreciation, Noah's commitment to this board and to the township. Thank you.
So noted.
Thank you, sir. Been my pleasure.
Thank you very much. Have a great holiday season. We'll see you in 2016.